family for most of those 40 years. I wouldn't have ever guessed that Lindy would have been growing satsumas this year 40 years ago, because back then I was helping her and her dad grow some of the best tobacco in South Georgia. They were tobacco farmers and always a great farm family. So it's been an interesting transition, I guess, Lindy, over the years. So really exciting to see the citrus industry kind of get started back in South Georgia and North Florida, and it's been good to be a part of it. So today, Lindy asked me to speak on soil moisture monitoring in citrus, and so I've kind of tried to think about three things with that topic of soil moisture monitoring: why you should get into the technology, how it works, and maybe lastly, some tips on how to get started with soil moisture monitoring. You know, we monitor what we value. It's amazing to me now as people across our country and across the world, everything that we monitor, our hearts, in our houses, we monitor things that we value. And on the farm, you know, that can be a lot of different things, from our irrigation system, our air temperatures. You know, we also sell weather stations, and this time of year, we pay a lot of attention to the air temperature in our grows. And so the point is, with the cellular networks that we have available now, we can connect to all kinds of devices and really stay connected, you know, on the farm quite well. If you want to leave town, most farm families find a little bit of time every now and then to try to get away, but you can certainly stay connected to your farm through these cellular connections, and keep in touch with your soil moisture while you're away for a few days, making sure that your trees are still have the good moisture available for them. So again, I want to kind of give you some reasons why you should look into soil moisture monitoring if you haven't already done so. You know, they're excellent records for analysis. The sensors will give you a stream of data that they'll take a reading all throughout the day and the night, and you can see when your trees are using a lot of water versus later on in the year when they're slowing down. So, and then you can analyze how much water you put out from week to week to see if you're over or under watering. So the charts that you'll come across as you start to put these sensors out in the grove are really good to analyze your irrigation management over the course of the year. And then secondly, this is one of the most important things I've discovered as I've started using this technology in a lot of different crops, not just citrus. But we as farmers, usually there's 2 or 3 times during the year that we start to question ourselves. Am I putting enough water out? Or conversely, am I putting too much water out? And the data that you see from these sensors will help you become much more confident in knowing, you know, when to back off irrigation or when to put more out. As far as training tools, you know, they're excellent for that as well. If you've got a large farm with multiple people looking after irrigation, you can kind of get everybody on the same page, because these sensors will train people to keep the moisture at the same level at different farms. You know, we all have different management styles. Some people like to irrigate more than others, and so this is just a tool that will help you kind of keep your farms irrigated the same way. This last point, monitoring for problems, is really one of my favorite ones. You know, while we're monitoring for soil moisture, we can, you know, we're relying on a very advanced irrigation system with pumps and valves and time clocks. And all this stuff is prone to fail at times, unfortunately, especially after it gets a few years of age on it. And we've come across many, many instances where we've discovered problems with some piece of equipment, a valve, maybe a valve sticks open and is delivering water to a certain zone throughout the runtime when it was supposed to be cut off. And these sensors will sometimes find problems before the farmer actually will, because of their sensitivity. Before I keep going with some more reasons as to why to get into soil moisture monitoring, I want to remind you that it's simply one tool in your toolbox. You know, we're never going to replace some of these things that we've used for ages. We're always going to keep wearing out our trucks, going from farm to farm, making sure all of the irrigation systems are working properly. And we're going to put a lot of steps in the grove, checking zones, checking the moisture in the bed around the tree. And, that's just never going to go away. And the old rain gauge, obviously, we're always going to have that manual rain gauge on the fence post. But again, all these tools have limitations. They're kind of a snapshot. You can't stay in that field day and night to see how that tree is changing throughout the year, throughout the week, or throughout the month, as things speed up and slow down due to our climate. So although we're not going to ever throw these tools away, they have limitations, and the soil moisture monitoring can really help make these tools even better. A heart doctor, I always like to use the analogy of a heart doctor who has a patient that has a problem with the heart. He really can't figure it out. What's the first thing he does? He orders a pacemaker for this person. And you wear that, not a pacemaker, a heart monitor, excuse me. And you wear that monitor for a week or two, and it detects every beat of your heart throughout that period of time. And so that allows the doctor to see, how your heart reacts day and night through the good times, the bad times, and helps him diagnose what's going on with your heart. And that's kind of the same analogy that I use with soil moisture monitoring. And we may show that a little bit in one of the graphs later on in the presentation. Of course, 4 more good reasons to look into soil moisture monitoring is that in most of our citrus groves, we're using some kind of micro irrigation, whether it be drip or microjets. We're concentrating this water. Rain is the best way to water anything. We all know that because it does it very uniformly. And but the drip irrigation or microjet irrigation is a very efficient way to put our irrigation water onto our crops. However, you run the risk of sometimes overwatering because you're really putting a lot of water in a very small spot. So again, the soil moisture sensors can really help you determine how deep that water is moving. It can show you where your active roots are. If you happen to be fertigating at the same time you're irrigating and you're overwatering, then you really got a double problem. You're losing fertilizer as well as the water. So that's one really big reason to understand how deep you're driving that water with your irrigation system. And again, for maybe the larger farmers, if you're not able to be at your farm as often as you'd like to, if you've got a time clock that's operating your irrigation system, you can actually see what happened last week and the week prior to that, and make sure that your valves are working, your time clock is operating as it's supposed to. So you can verify those run times and start times because of the sensitivity of this equipment. So that's a few reasons why you should consider it if you hadn't already done so. Next, I'd like to just briefly kind of describe how it works. I like to think of it in terms of 3 different components. You've got the actual sensor. I apologize, this is on the left side of the screen is a sensor in a snap bean field. And usually that sensor is cabled, has a cable running over to the cellular device or the the device that's sending the data to the web. So that center picture is just a snapshot of an automated rain gauge and a cellular device that's connected over to that sensor. So it's wirelessly sending it to the internet through Verizon or AT&T, et cetera. And then that data is going to be presented to you on your phone or your computer via some sort of an app. And really, when you're making a decision on maybe making some kind of purchase decisions, you need to be thinking about all three of these components. All three of them need to be reliable, easy to use, and something that you can get comfortable with over time. The sensors themselves, I won't spend a lot of time on that. We've got a lot of companies manufacturing these now. One of the main differences is that there are single level sensors like the one on the left, or a multi-level sensor like the one on the right. The one on the right has a sensor at every 4 inches, so 4, 8, and 12 inches. And I like to use at least 2 sensors in most locations I'm working with. And in the case of citrus, obviously we got a fairly shallow root system, so maybe 6 inches and 12 inches at the very least is something that you would want to be monitoring. But again, there's many different kind of sensors that you can look at when you get into this technology. I'd like to bring up something now about our cellular networks that you need to pay close attention to if you've already got this equipment out in your field. A lot of in the southeastern United States, we use a lot of Verizon 3G cellular networks, and actually Verizon is phasing that network out in December of 2020. So if your equipment is couple years old or older, there's a real risk that you've got some of the modem that's on the old 3G network, and it's at risk of stop reporting at some point this next year. Verizon can't tell us when every modem is going to stop, but so it may be January, it may be June of 2021. But any modem that's on a 3G network with Verizon is at risk, and you should be talking to your dealer about getting an update to your modem so that you don't start losing data, especially when we're coming up in this cold. With these cold temperatures, we want to do some frost protection or whatever with our irrigation on our trees. So lastly, I'd like to talk about the data that we get and how to interpret that. This is, again, this is really what you get after you decide what kind of sensor you get, what kind of cellular device is going to get it to the web. This is the kind of data you'll start seeing on your phone or your computer. And I'd like to describe this slide just a little bit. You see here 3 different areas, a blue, a green, and a red area. The blue is too much water, and while the green is really the optimum zone. There's a black line in between those 2 layers, and that's called our full point. So really, as irrigators, there's not a real reason to keep your moisture above that black line into the blue zone. With drip irrigation, it's going to happen because we're putting so much water out in such a small space. We're really flooding that area. So you are going to go into the blue zone. And this slide really depicts that very well. You can see in the middle of the slide, there was 9 days, 9 consecutive days, probably operated by a time clock, where this irrigation system came on. And of course, it went up and down nine consecutive days. It's in that blue zone, so there's excess water there, and that water wants to drain on out. It will drain on out, but every day, the irrigation system came back on, and it was actually driving that moisture higher and higher each day, as I kind of tried to point out with that arrow. So this is an indication that, you know, we should really slow down on our irrigation at this point. If you have to irrigate every day, you should back off on the number of minutes or hours that you're running so that you kind of level that trend off, or even allow that trend to drift downward toward that green zone somewhat. Because this data is telling me that during those 9 days, this producer was actually delivering slightly more water every day than his trees were taking up. So he was really overwatering a little bit. And the same thing happened on the next 2 events where he irrigated for 6 days and 5 days. I think I actually recounted that, and it's maybe 5 days and 4 days. But again, you can see the trend was upward, and that's really not necessary. That should be kind of even, or maybe even a downward trend. And the reason for possibly using the downward trend is that we want to take advantage of our rainfall. So, you know, there's having this moisture content drift down into that green zone is fine at times. If it continues to drift down into the red, that's when you got to start increasing your run times and reevaluating your irrigation. And this slide is an example of that. This was taken later in the year in September. And you can see we had a couple of rains over on the left side of the screen, and then we had 6 days where no irrigation was happening. And I'm really not sure what happened in this case, but there were 6 clear, after the last rain, there were 6 days of no irrigation, and you can see these trees were pulling moisture out every day. We know that because it takes a step down every day, and that's kind of what we call the heartbeat of the crop. If you're not irrigating, as was happening in this slide, you really want to see a clear step down, and that shows you that you're active, your roots are very active, the moisture's changing every day, and you're removing more and more moisture every day. Now, unfortunately, this slide shows that that trend continued for 8 more days, and you can see the steps really got very, very slow, and there's almost no steps. And there could be several reasons for that, but in my mind, in this case, something happened to that irrigation system, and he got close to that red zone and into the red zone. The trees were becoming a little bit moisture stressed, and they were having a hard time getting all the moisture they wanted. So this is a case where, you know, we should have been irrigating more if the rain hadn't come back. And kind of this is a scenario later on in the year when our trees are slowing down even more, and the same thing happened. You can see that heartbeat after the 1 day of excessive drainage, all the excess water drained out. You can see there were 6 days of stepping down every day, but the trees are obviously taking up less water at this point. And we had 4 more days where it was slowing down even more. But in this scenario, we had an irrigation or rain, 2 or 3 irrigations or rains that were easily able to keep this moisture in that green band, which is kind of where we want it all throughout the growing season. So I put in this slide just as an example of showing some other things you can determine from soil moisture monitoring. This is actually not citrus, it's a row crop. And we learned a lot of things about soil moisture monitoring from all the crops that we work with. But this is some data that came out of the middle of the row crop season in June. And you can see that let me explain a little bit before I go into the red and the blue lines on top are the sensors, the shallow sensors at 4 and 8 inches. And the purple and blue, light blue at the bottom, those are the deeper sensors. And of course, the middle 2 lines are right in the middle of the probe. That light blue line at the bottom of the screen is a 24-inch sensor. So my cursor on the slide shows that about July 3rd, those deep roots were really kicking in. And before that time, they had kind of been inactive. And I'll explain it this way. You know, you can see that it had a small rain early in June and then had about 10 days of no rain. Well, this crop took up all that shallow moisture and it was really starting to get dry up top. And so that allowed those deeper roots to become active because there was still plenty of moisture down deep. And this is the kind of data that you can mine out of soil moisture monitoring to just really get to understand your trees, how they're developing as they're young. Right now, a lot of people have young orchards and groves that are going to be changing over the years as the trees get more mature. Later on in July, you can see that he had 3 rains, and one of those actually went down to the 8-inch sensor. That's the blue line. So this is just a little taste of what some of the data that you can find and some of the questions you can help get answered by using soil moisture monitoring. So I'd kind of like to finish up with just a few tips on how to get started. This is just one slide. First of all, I'd like to say that you really just need to get some good support. Get with your county agent or your consultants. And a lot of these people have experience with soil moisture monitoring. As a grower, you should really invest some time in learning about this data yourself. You know, you are the person that knows your farm the best. You know the health of your trees. You know your irrigation system and its limitations. And so if you understand what this data is telling you, you'll be able to better utilize the technology yourself. But for the first year or two, you really need to get some good support to help you understand what that data is telling you and adapt it to your farm. That third point I'm making is to start out with one sensor. A lot of times I see people, you know, they've got a farm with 3 zones or 4 irrigation zones, and they want to put one in every zone, and that's fine. That's good. But if you've got limited funds, really that first soil moisture station that you put out is actually going to be the best one that you learn from. You can learn a lot from the first sensor that you put out. So I would encourage you just to get started with one. And then lastly, go ahead and get started this year. As I said earlier, many farmers have a certain time of the year where they kind of doubt themselves as to whether they're putting out enough moisture or they're putting out too much. And again, these sensors are so good that they can help build your confidence and make you a better irrigation manager throughout the growing season. I have a little quote here that I referred to a good bit by the founder of GoDaddy. He says that anything that is measured and watched improves. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. Soil moisture monitoring can make you a better farmer. You need to invest time to understand what it's telling you. But after a year or two of learning what this data is showing you, I think you'll make better irrigation management decisions. And if you're fertigating, that could even improve your fertigation techniques as well. So, Lindy, I think that is my last slide. I really appreciate the invitation to speak on soil moisture monitoring in citrus. This is a great crop for us here in South Georgia and North Florida. I hope we have continued success. I hope we have a great 2021 year, Lindy.
Thank you, Rad, for that very informative presentation. And I just want to tell the audience to don't forget, we will have live questions, time for that, and to sign up for their pesticide and CEU and CCA credits. And just thank everyone for attending, and don't forget to thank our sponsors. And this concludes our presentation. Thank you, Rad.